Hello, and welcome to the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Celebration of Women Centennial event, a culmination of our year-long celebration of a woman's right to vote. My name's Carl Guardino. I'm CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and it is an honor to have you with us today. This celebration began a year ago, August 26, 2019, with special guest Nancy Pelosi, the first Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, who is a woman, with 440 other women leaders and rising stars, ranging in age from 8 to 86. Today, we are joined by visionary public leaders like Congresswoman Karen Bass, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Supervisor Cindy Chavez, President of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, Congressmember Anna Eshoo of the 18th Congressional District, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, First Partner for the State of California, and Maria Shriver, journalist, author, and former First Lady of California. Our goal today is to inspire, engage, and inform through interactive conversations with our speakers, our panelists, and allowing each of our 700 multi-generational, multicultural participants to actively participate. As we launch our morning together, it is truly a pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, the Bay Area Vice President for Alaska Airlines, our presenting sponsor today, Ms. Annabelle Chang. Annabelle?
Thank you, Carl. It is a true honor to share the virtual stage with you. I know this is your very last event with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group as its CEO. So we all know, Carl, that you are an incredible force for good for the region. And on a personal note, you are a true and dear friend. So thank you for organizing this. At Alaska Airlines, we are so honored to be able to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And we are committed to cultivating and really empowering the next generation of female leaders. And at Alaska Airlines, I am delighted to share that we are the very first Fortune 500 company on the West Coast to reach gender parity in our boardroom among independent corporate board directors. And from the boardroom, we take it to the cockpit, and we have pledged to increase the number of African-American female pilots by 2025 in our airline. And that's through a combination of mentorship, training, and scholarship. But I would be remiss in not taking a moment to note that the 19th Amendment, even through its passage, still left millions of American women behind. And many of these women looked just like me. For many of women of color, the right to vote was not fully secured until 50 years later due to discriminatory practices around language and citizenship. Entire segments of Asian Americans and Native Americans were not granted citizenship until the 1950s. And for Black men and women, the right to vote was under fear of government intimidation and intervention until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And even as recently as 1975, did we finally get voting protections for those who are language minorities. So for example, many of us in the Latinx, Asian, and Native communities. So this has been a long and arduous struggle, and you can understand that these milestones demonstrate how long it took to secure that right to vote for us to have an opportunity to shape our own government. And so today is an opportunity for us to thank the trailblazers, the suffragettes, who helped pave that way. And it is also a moment to honor our female leaders of today. So thank you, Carl.
Annabelle Chang, thank you for reminding us that these struggles not only happened 100 years ago, but they have been ongoing in nature. And it's important that we never forget the lengths that it has taken for people, for women, for people of color, for people throughout our nation to earn what should be rightfully all of ours throughout. And that's why we are so proud to have this celebration of women leaders today. with leaders like Annabelle Chang and others with whom we'll be interacting throughout the day, including all of you who are participating directly. But none of this would be possible without the generosity of Silicon Valley Leadership Group member companies who have made today such an inspiring and engaging opportunity through their event sponsorships. In addition to Alaska Airlines, as you can see on your screen, we'd like to thank AMD, Chegg, Intuitive, KLA, Workday, eBay, the San Francisco 49ers, Cruise, AT&T, Lyft, Lumentum, Marvell, VMware, Genentech, Synopsys, Western Digital, Bank of America, Aura, Google, Juniper Networks, KPMG, Micron, Palo Alto University, Poly, Robert Half International, PwC, Stryker, ServiceNow, the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Bloom Energy. And we are especially appreciative of our generous media partners, the Bay Area News Group, San Francisco Chronicle, Silicon Valley Business Journal, and the San Francisco Business Times. The leadership and support of these Silicon Valley Leadership Group member companies not only supports today's celebration, but also helps conclude our year-long efforts of activities and events as we commemorate this centennial celebration of a woman's right to vote. We thank each of you. It is our pleasure now to hear from two longtime public sector leaders of our Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, former council member and vice mayor of San Jose, and a former school board member who is generously presenting a commendation to our Silicon Valley Leadership Group for our ongoing efforts on behalf of women and girls, the Honorable Dave Cortese, along with the president of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, with whom we will be hearing more from later this morning, the Honorable Cindy Chavez. Please join me in thanking and welcoming Supervisors Dave Cortese and Cindy Chavez.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. The thanks are all to you and to the women leaders who are represented here today, the women leaders across the Valley who obviously exceed the number of women leaders here today, but are represented so well by those participating in today's celebration of women. We wanted, when I say we, I mean I and Supervisor Cindy Chavez, president of our board, wanted to bring forward today a special commendation from the Board of Supervisors, recognizing the Silicon Valley Leadership Group for its role in gender equity over the years of your leadership. We are all sorry to see you leaving, but we will have many more accolades for you, Carl Guardino, in the weeks and months ahead. I'm sure of that. But today we wanted to recognize the leadership group. And let me put it into context very quickly. 47 years ago, the Board of Supervisors in Santa Clara County created something called the Commission on the Status of Women, specifically to eliminate the practice of discrimination and prejudice against women based on gender in the areas of housing, employment, education, community service, and related fields, all areas of focus of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group under your watch, Carl. I would have to say that more progress has been made in the last 7 years than in the prior 40. And it's thanks to women like you. It's thanks to my colleague, Cindy Chavez. While I consider myself and have been acknowledged by my colleague as a feminist, and I know, Carl, you are recognized as such yourself, it is women leaders like Cindy Chavez, those who have led the women's movement here in Santa Clara County, and those executives amongst the over 340 members of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group as employers, who not only have stood with all of us in public policy to effectuate change, but when we came out with the strongest gender equity ordinance in the country, embedding $2 billion in county contracts with requirements for gender equity, not only did we not meet opposition, but we received endorsement and support from the membership of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Thank you so much for that. And we have brought with us a commendation. I want to make sure I give Supervisor Chavez an opportunity to hit cleanup here and make her comments. And then we can do a virtual presentation of this commendation here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Cortese. Board President Chavez, welcome.
Thank you, and we're honored and delighted to get to bring this commendation to you. And it is true that Dave is, for many years, as I was the only woman on the Board of Supervisors, he was the other gal on the Board of Supervisors, and I say that with a lot of praise. I enjoyed very much all the work we did. And just a couple things that I wanted to say to the leadership group and to the women who are on this call today. We know that each one of us has to do our part to honor the leadership and memory of all of those who were part of the suffrage movement, the men and women, and acknowledging, as Ms. Chung did earlier, that for many, many women, including from my own culture, didn't get the opportunity to vote until the last 50 years. What that has created, though, is, I think, an opportunity for all of us to take what we've learned from those movements and do something much better, much stronger, and much healthier, and much faster than we've done in the past. We need the leadership group. We need every one of you women leaders who are part of the business community to help lift up voices to fight human trafficking, fight domestic violence, fight for pay equity. And someday, I'd really like to be part of a discussion where we're not talking about the first woman this or the first person of color that. And I think that is a goal that we can achieve working with you. And that's why this commendation is being offered to all of you, because we're so confident in our partnership. We're grateful to the partnership we had with the leadership group under Carl Guardino. We feel very, very blessed. Carl, thank you for all of your work. And we look forward to working with you through this transition. Congratulations to the leadership group.
Carl, this really does exist. Virtual handoff. I wish we could be together in person, and I know all of you wish that as well. But we will make sure to get this to the leadership group, and we look forward to many more acknowledgments and accolades in the future. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of time today.
Board President Chavez, Supervisor Cortese, thank you for your servant leadership for so many years for our county, region, and state. We're delighted to have you with us. And President Chavez, we look forward to having you on one of our interactive panels later this morning. Throughout our interactive day together, please write down my cell phone number, 408-838-4848. Also use our chat box. Text me your questions throughout the day to pose to our speakers and panelists. We have built-in time throughout the day for your questions and comments to be heard, in order to engage each other in the interactive dialogue that we all enjoy. Again, my text number, 408-838-4848, or use our chat box. To introduce our first conversation this morning, it brings me great pleasure to welcome the Vice President and the Chief of Staff to the CEO of Western Digital, Celeste Cooper.
Thank you, Carl. Visions with values. That is the best way that I can describe our first guest. She is an award-winning author, journalist, former First Lady of California, and a philanthropist. Yet it is not any of these titles that matter. It is the way she moves and motivates others to improve communities, both in California and throughout the world, that has always set her apart. Ms. Shriver earned the Peabody Award and was co-anchor of NBC's Emmy Award-winning coverage of the Summer Olympics, executive producer of the Alzheimer's Project, and is currently a special anchor and correspondent for NBC News. A graduate of Georgetown University, mother of 4 amazing children, and author of several books, including What's Heaven and I've Been Thinking. Today, Maria is celebrating one of her children's birthdays, and we were fortunate to have pre-recorded this interview with Maria and the Senior Vice President of Advanced Micro Devices for Worldwide Marketing, HR, and Investor Relations, Ruth Cotter. Please welcome Maria Shriver and Ruth Cotter.
Hello, and thank you everybody for joining the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Centennial Celebration. I'm delighted that we could all gather here today for a conversation with Maria. We're super excited to have you with us, Maria. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here talking to women and to be also in conversation, larger conversation with my great friend, Carl Guardino.
Yes, that's awesome. So maybe to kick off, Maria, reflecting on the progress we've made since the ratification of the 19th Amendment and based on where we are today, what obstacles do you think the next generation of women leaders may have to face, and how should we think about them?
Well, that's a huge question, right? As the mother of two young women, I think about that a lot. And I often talk to them, so I'll tell you what I tell them. We've made huge progress since I was their age.
Mm-hmm.
When I was working and had my first child, the expectation was I'd come back to work in a week or two.
Mm-hmm.
Today, women who are anchoring can safely, in the news business anyway, can safely take time off and come back and get their job. That's not the case for every woman in this country. That's where we want to go, that
Mm-hmm.
every person who has a child will be able to take leave and be able to come back to their job. So we've made progress. We have more to go.
Mm-hmm.
Family leave is something that I think is a big, big part of making it possible for women to lead in all different areas of their life and at different stages of their life, and having to choose between parenting and leading is a choice that too many people have to make. So I think that that's a big place that we need to make progress. I think we've made progress on gender roles. There's a whole different conversation going on now in homes that didn't exist 10 years ago, much less 20 or 30 years ago. That conversation needs to go further, but it's happening. So I think that we've made a lot of progress, but I think using our voices, speaking our truth, asking for what we need is part of getting us where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think more women in politics helps. I think more women in leadership places in business and in all different facets of life helps. I think we also talk a lot about what it means to be a leader. I often talk about being a leader in your own home, being a leader in your own life. I think that's super important. And what I mean by that is knowing what you want to do with your life, I think is the most important thing for any one person. People get, I think, sidetracked thinking, oh my God, I have to change the world. I think it's really important to know who you are, what you want to do with your life, what leadership means to you. And that could be, I want to lead in my family. I want to be the best mother that I can be at this decade of my life. That's as far as I want to go. I want to be the best daughter I can be, the best employee. And I think owning your choices is a really powerful aspect of leadership. Being grounded in your own choices, secure in them, and then being open that those choices will change as you may change.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I guess the long-winded answer to all of that is that we've come really far and we have further to go. But I am encouraged by how far we've come.
That's great. I think as a collective, we absolutely are very encouraged. And I really like that point that you emphasized around being comfortable and even being a leader in your home or of your own life, right? We as women have a lot of aspirations and hopes and we chase many dreams, which is wonderful, but you can start with some very basic steps.
I think that's super important. I think there's a lot of pressure on women today.
Right.
Women feel a lot of pressure to be perfect in so many areas of their life. They feel, wow, look at that woman. She just had 2 kids. She's already in a size 6 jeans. She's running a business. She's an entrepreneur. Oh my God, what about me? I feel bad.
Right.
And I think that's, it's really important to kind of keep your eyes on your own self, to think about what works for you, and also not to kind of focus on what someone else is doing, because we never really know what's going on in that person's life.
Right.
They may be presenting some image that might not actually even be accurate. And my experience is that so often is the case. So it's best to just focus on your kitchen table, in your own spirit and self and try to move yourself forward.
That's great advice, and you're an incredible role model for many people, and many people with us here today. You mentioned though career and family and managing and juggling, and do you think women have to make a choice? Like, can both be unified as we think about a very successful career and raising a family, and it doesn't have to be one or the other? How have you experienced that?
Well, once again, we could talk for an hour about that one single subject. Right. I think I always try to say, to define what is your definition of success. Right. You know, is success being on the cover of a magazine? Is success making a certain amount of money? Is success being successful in the eyes of your friend? Mm-hmm. What is success? And I found myself having that conversation with myself after the birth of my first child. I was like, okay, wait a second. You know, what is success going to look like for me? And it's different now that I have a child than I thought it was. And it has changed. It changed with every new child. It has changed with age. But I think trying to have as much control over my time became my definition of success. Mm-hmm. Being able to take my kids to school was a definition of success for me. Being able to go to their after-school activities, being able to manage my work in a way that allowed me to parent. It affected my career, but it turned out to be the right choice for me. And many people would say to me, well, you know, you could be doing more in your career, and why aren't you? And I was like, well, because I can't do that and also mother the way I want to mother. So I think kind of being confident in what success is to you. I think for many people, obviously the vast majority of people don't have a choice in determining whether they can work outside the home and parent. Mm-hmm. And so trying to manage that, having a living wage, being able to find, once again, coming back to family leave, coming back to affordable daycare. These are all huge issues that impact how you can work in your kind of feeling of success. But I think we want to look at ourselves, I try to look at as a holistic human being. Right? How am I at home? Is that person in collaboration with the person I am at work? Am I the kind of person leading my team that I like, that I admire, that I respect? Is that person I'm looking at in the mirror someone that I can look up to and look at and be okay with? And I think it's a matter also of being gentle with ourselves as we progress. I think, you know, I'm very different today than I was when I was 20, right, when I was 30. And I think, you know, this is a marathon, this life, right? Our careers, they're a marathon. They're a journey. And I think young women are really hard on themselves. I see a lot of anxiety out there, a lot of stress, a lot of people coming to me going, I can't find my purpose. I need to find my purpose. I need to change the world. Breathe, you know, breathe. I think, you know, it's your purpose will come when you're quiet.
I love that. I love that. Be at peace, be comfortable, yet that will bring confidence. And this is a journey. I think that's a terrific reminder to everybody here today. It's not a sprint as we think about running this marathon, and we evolve and grow throughout every phase of our lives. Maria, it's been a pleasure to chat with you today. A lot of advice, real content-rich advice for everybody here today, and I'm sure we have some great takeaways from you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and I just want to encourage the young women that are here today to stay the course. As you said, it is a marathon, to be gentle with themselves, compassionate with themselves, because the way you are with yourself is the way you are out in the world. And so if you want someone to be like that to you, be like that to yourself, and you will be like that to others. And I have no doubt that all of us are here for a distinct and divine purpose. Our job is to find what that is and then to bring it to the world, because definitely the world needs us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Maria. Very much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Rhonda Johnson, and I'm president of AT&T California. Thank you so much for letting me participate today and frankly, to be part of introducing this amazing panel that you're all about to hear. These women are amazing leaders in their field, and I'm so honored to introduce them. So let me get to my job today to introduce this panel. They're leaders in business, technology, medical, STEM, and political fields. First of all, let me start out by introducing our moderator for this panel, Laura Clayton McDonald. She's Vice President, Enterprise Sale, Eastern Region, ServiceNow. Laura is a visionary sales executive who has held leadership roles at 2 of the world's top tech companies. She is currently the Vice President, Enterprise Sales for East Region of ServiceNow. She has extensive sales management and legal experience and has held executive level positions at leading companies in the high-tech industry. I know Laura is going to do an amazing job as our panel moderator. Now to our panelists. Let's start with Esther Lam, Chief Marketing Officer of Chegg. Esther serves as the Chief Marketing Officer, driving all online and offline marketing and communication initiatives at Chegg with an emphasis on consumer interest and rental behavior. Esther has been honored with numerous industry awards, including Ad Age's Women to Watch, Marketer of the Year, and multiple marketing and advertising awards. Next up is Arden Hoffman, Chief People Officer at Cruise. Arden Hoffman is Cruise Chief People Officer. Her team supports Cruise's mission to build the most advanced self-driving vehicle by creating a high-performance culture where cruisers can do their best work of their lives. Her leadership guided the company from a private startup to a publicly traded company. Prior to that, she served in numerous people leadership roles at Goldman Sachs and at Google. Next, we have Darla Hutton, VP US Marketing and Custom Hospital Analytics for Intuitive Surgical. Darla Hutton is Vice President of Marketing and Custom Hospital Analytics for US Region at Intuitive, a global technology leader and maker of the Da Vinci and Ion robotic systems. Darla has more than 20 years of experience in healthcare, medical device, and robotic-assisted surgery innovation. In 12 years with Intuitive, she has served in various commercial and operational leadership roles. She is a passionate leader and champion of inclusion, diversity, and STEM education, and spearheads industry collaborations with societies to support development of women in surgery. Next up is Lena Nicolaides, Senior Vice President, KLA Corporation. Dr. Lena Nicolaides is an internationally recognized executive with more than 20 years of experience in semiconductor capital equipment. Lena is author of more than 50 technical articles and holds 38 US patents. Lena serves on the Women in Engineering Advisory Board and is the executive sponsor of Women in STEM Empowered Employee Resource Group at KLA. Next, we're so honored to have Anna Eshoo, Congress member, California's 18th District. Anna Eshoo is U.S. Representative from California's 18th Congressional District, serving since 1993. Last year, Democratic members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee voted to elect Congresswoman Eshoo as the first woman ever to serve as chair of the Health Subcommittee. Congressmember Eshoo is a leader on expanding broadband deployment and technology and telecommunications issues overall. Next, we have Ruth Cotter, SVP Worldwide Marketing, Human Resources, and Investor Relations at AMD. Ruth Cotter is AMD's Senior Vice President of Worldwide Marketing, Human Resources, and Investor Relations. Ruth leads her team to ensure AMD's inclusive learning and innovative workplace culture sets it apart from its competition. Ms. Cotter was a recipient of the 2018 Women Worth Watching Award from Profiles in the Diversity Journal and is a 2018 Top 10 Champion of Global Diversity by Diversity Global magazine. And then finally, but not least, we have Cindy Chavez that we heard from earlier, President of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Chavez represents more than 500,000 people east, central, and south San Jose. As part of her women's agenda, Supervisor Chavez successfully got funding approved to give women in Santa Clara County historical recognition for contributions in education, tech, medicine, science, politics, and in other fields. She's also leading a year-long campaign for 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, focusing on voter registration and accurate Census 2020 numbers. It's an impressive group. I know it's going to be a dynamic panel. So let me turn it over to the moderator. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rhonda, so much for the introduction, and the Silicon Valley Leadership Group for the invitation to moderate. We're going to cover a variety of topics because we have such a beautiful diversity here with our panelists. But if there's one consistent thread with our topics, it's that they're focused on people. On women, yes, on our communities, on our culture, on our leaders. Especially now, putting our minds to work in support of helping people, supporting people, nurturing people, and being accepting of people. It's so important. I know this group will make good things happen. So let's start our panelist questions with Congresswoman Eshoo of the 18th Congressional District. Congresswoman, you've played a critical role on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And you currently serve as the chair of the Health Subcommittee. In 1919, the House of Representatives passed the enabling legislation that allowed the 19th Amendment to move forward the following year and gave women the right to vote in the United States. While much progress has been made in these past 100 years, let's look forward. What do you believe to be the next frontier for women's rights and equal rights, for which you are personally advocating through your role in the House of Representatives?
Well, thank you, Laura, and it's wonderful to be with all of you today. Let me just do a shout out to Carl first. This is his last leadership group event. And Carl, we're all really in your debt because your leadership has really left a legacy of imprimaturs on our region, on our state, and our country. So bravo to you. And I know you're not going away, so we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. So I'm going to take a step back, Laura, and talk about the importance of women who have really fought their way to positions of power and are using that power to benefit all women, regardless of the issue. When I was first elected to Congress, I was proud to be one of 54 women in the House. That was 1992, and it was called the Year of the Woman. So I guess they just meant it to be that 1 year. Now I'm part of 127 women in the House. The number of women in Congress has a direct impact on policy priorities and the agenda that we advance. Would the Affordable Care Act have provided birth control coverage if it were not for women legislators? I don't think so. Who focused the Veterans Affairs Committee on military families? It was Michelle Obama, Jill Biden, and Gabby Giffords. Who gavelled her historic speakership, surrounded by children invoking their future? That was Speaker Pelosi. So send more women to Congress, to the C-suites of your companies, to the boardrooms. Women bring the sum total of their experiences to the task, legislating, managing, directing, and creating. Add women, change everything. In 2019, the 100-year anniversary of women getting the right to vote, I was elected the first woman in the history of the Congress to chair the subcommittee on health. Under my leadership, the Health Subcommittee has been the most productive subcommittee of energy and commerce. Women get things done. Every bill I write and advance through my subcommittee, I start out by seeking compromise as a tool for progress. And that is not weakness to collaborate across the aisle. So I want to end with a caution to everyone. If children are at home for another 8 months, and it appears that they will be, Don't let the responsibility of parenthood cripple women's careers. Let's understand that valuable talent cannot be relegated to the home front and have women fall behind in promotions and opportunities and financial reward at work. If you're a woman in a position to prevent this inequity, please do so. Ask your company to consider an accommodation in this crisis so that talented women return to the company when it's over. And make that case, because retention has a value. In other words, let's look out for each other, because we need to if we're going to change the culture, the priorities, and the trajectories of the organizations we have fought so hard to become leaders of. So thank you, Laura, for your leadership, to everyone that's part of this, I think, historic event during historic times. And I think that together we're going to make more progress. There are so many that are counting on us to do so.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Yeah.
Just love the guidance and advice and the
You're
inspiration.
so kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy, I'm going to turn to you. You are the president of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, and you have been intensely focused on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on our public health. Without losing sight of the economic health of workers, families, employers, and government agencies. You've been described by our Silicon Valley Leadership Group CEO, Carl Guardino, as the most effective local government leader in the region, and not only advancing an ambitious agenda, but that rare combination of leader with a big vision who is also masterful at the small details. Carl also credits much of your effectiveness to your willingness to give credit to others for work you have often envisioned and championed. So let's focus on the last part of that statement. Do you find your work more effective when you are willing to share credit with others? Are you ever concerned as a role model for other leaders, women or men, that in any way that would diminish the work that you've accomplished?
Well, thank you so much. And I'm blushing, Carl. Thank you for that. You know, I think one of the things that women really understand pretty innately is that we recognize that much of the time when we do really important good things, we do them in collaboration with others. And, you know, and I have struggled a little bit with the idea of when and how to collaborate in a way that is effective. So let me just say two things about this. One is that we are taught in our society that power and leadership is a zero-sum game. That if it's good for me, it's not good for someone else. And that is such an old way of thinking that we really have to start thinking about how we bring as many people across the finish line as we possibly can for whatever the action is that we're trying to get to. And if you think about this for a moment, whether we're fighting domestic violence, human trafficking, equal pay, really supporting each other and getting where we're going, that we can lose sight of one really important thing. And that is that one of the highest obligations we have is to bring others with us. And so what I would say is I seek to be excellent at my job. Why? Because when any of you go to the polls, I don't want you to worry that I'm a woman or a Latina. I want you to look at me and say, that person knows how to get things done. And this is my mantra that I actually stole from someone else, is that I believe women working in collaboration with women and men have the ability to do everything all at once. And that means being able to fight COVID-19 while we're really thinking about the future of childcare. So I do worry a little bit about it because I want women to feel proud of what they do. And so here are the two things I would say. I'm very good at what I do. I'm not shying away from that. But I think being able to do it with others is the most important thing we're called to, because our job is to be useful to the world, especially when you're in public office. My job is to be useful, right? So anyway, thank you for that hard question, and I'll be doing some more soul searching, and it's too early to have any glass of wine, but I do have coffee to keep me going.
That's terrific.
I'm really excited to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Cindy. I really love it. You know, we get the job done as a team, and the heart of what you do is being that servant. Servant leadership is absolutely critical. So thank you again, Cindy, for those wonderful, wonderful comments. Now I'm going to turn to Esther. Esther, as the Chief Marketing Officer for Chegg, tell us about the mission of the company and how you successfully advance that mission. What are your customers like, and how do you ensure that your company's mission is engaging and inspiring to everyone, taking into account all of our differences, age, income, ethnicity, and gender?
Thanks so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone. I work for Chegg, which is an online learning platform that helps support students in their academic journey. So whatever they're doing, whatever school they go to, we help support them. We're direct to consumer, and we started as a textbook rental company where you could just save a lot of money on textbooks, but we've since pivoted to digital services like 24/7 homework help, or on-demand Q&A, or chat-based tutoring. As a matter of interest, during COVID, demand for Chegg surged when 2.7 billion students went online globally overnight. But back to your question, at the heart of our culture and our company is our mission, which is to put students first. We do what's right for them. It influences every decision we make in the company, including our policies and how we reach our customers. And in order to do this, we have to understand our audience. So let me just talk about our audience and their needs, some pain points and aspirations. So first of all, the average student in college today is 26, much older and more diverse than what I remember when I went to school. 45% are non-white, increasingly from single-family homes where everyone works. It takes an average of 6 years to get a 4-year degree. I bet you people don't know that. 43% will not graduate, yet take on substantial debt. And very importantly, and relevant to this conversation, 56% of the enrolled students are female and hold 2/3 of the student debt. Wow. There are 2.1 million single moms in college. So that's a lot of smart women. And our role as a company is to help them improve their outcomes and help them succeed. And I believe our agenda should be about helping to nurture them and help us improve our representation of female leadership and influence. When I was thinking about what to say, I remembered that I was one of only 6 women in my business school class of 40 people. I'm a Canadian, so they're smaller classes. And I haven't had a female boss since I was in an entry-level role many decades ago. So when it comes to improving gender and racial diversity, I work for a company where I can help influence that. And we're not there yet, but we're making strides. So we have 3 women on our board. We have 4 women in our C-suite, which is generally better than the industry average. Wow. But what we're working on and need to improve on is our pipeline. Females represent 40% of managers and above, which is similar to the industry, but I do want to say that in marketing, females represent 56% of managers and above, which is more representative of our student audience. So I believe we can do a lot to help raise the voices of certainly females moving forward and get them into a position to help be more influential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. And thank you for the reminder about how essential education is. It really puts you on that path to gender equality. Yeah. And all that we can do to support women and people of color on that path will give them that access to power that we've been talking about and those leadership skills. So thank you, Esther, for all that you do. Let me now turn to Arden. As the Chief People Officer of Cruise, how difficult it is to secure a diverse talent base at all levels of the company. And can you share with us the progress you're making in achieving your goals? And by the way, as a fellow grad from UC Berkeley, go Bears.
Absolutely, go Bears. Thank you so much, Laura, and thanks to everyone for letting me be on this panel. It's an honor. Cruise is, we're just, for those of you who don't know, we're designing the world's most advanced self-driving vehicles, and we're gonna move people to places, things, and experiences they care about. We're at the forefront of new technology. It's why I joined. It doesn't come without risks and a long path to our success. But we are here to change the world, and there's so many amazing opportunities to bring people into this industry, to bring people into the kind of growth that we're seeing in this field. Thousands of types of jobs, different engineering type of jobs, and all kinds of places that will be expanding around the United States. So I'm really excited about our mission. And I came to Cruise a little bit over a year ago. And one of the biggest focuses that I had in starting was, let's make sure that Cruise continues to grow and grow in a diverse way and brings more and different people into our company. I think, the question is really, it's really well put, because overall, it is very difficult and more complex than people realize to bring in a diverse group of people into your company. Levels make a big difference in terms of how you diversify your employee population. The more senior the role, the more challenging it is to fill that role. It may not be because there's lack of a pool, but it may be because people who are more experienced have more barriers into wanting to take a new role, wanting to take more risks in terms of, hey, I'm going to go to a private company that is on the forefront of a new technology, and am I comfortable making that shift from working at a public company where they're getting stock and it's liquid and they know they're going to get paid every quarter in that way, and we're like saying, hey, come here and get involved in a dream and the future of what's going to happen. So that can be quite challenging. We also have challenges in the Bay Area. People may not want to uproot their families. They may not want to, move or even commute from the Valley. I'm a San Francisco native, 5th generation, and many of you on the call are obviously from here as well. And it's changed drastically. The Bay Area is less diverse than it was 20 years ago. It is harder to live in. It is more expensive to live in. And we have challenges in terms of getting even people to drive from, Palo Alto into San Francisco. When we think about different levels to the question, undergraduate hiring, it's frankly much easier. You can go out and you can recruit all over the country. So you have a much more diverse talent pool and pipeline. And people are excited. They come to you already, and they're willing to move to San Francisco for work and for the opportunities, because they know that there's so many. The challenge is that most people at this level, even if you go and, we recruit at HSBCUs and we'll go to women engineering focused schools, they stay for 2 to 3 years sometimes. I don't know about you all, but I had a lot of jobs in my 20s because I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And you have to respect that. I think Marie's comments earlier about knowing who you are and what you want to explore is important. And sometimes companies like ours will come up against that. It's hard to convince people to do something that, it's like, hey, stay with us when you can go take a different opportunity. Obviously, we want people to stay with us as long as possible. But the opportunities in the Bay Area are really abundant for a number of people. And so we really want them to stay as long as they can. But, the competition is really fierce. As I mentioned, as you recruit people who are more senior, it gets more difficult. The Bay Area, as I mentioned, continues to get less diverse racially and economically. I'm not saying anything that many people on this call don't already know. But if you think about Oakland, Black residents of Oakland, the population has dropped from 43% to 27% in just a matter of years. And we expect to see that decline continue. And that's unfortunate in terms of the opportunities that are here in the Bay Area that we should be providing to everyone who's from here and has grown up here and lives here and wants to have a fulfilling life. We have really been focused at Cruise. We're a younger company. We're about 1,800 people. Again, I joined at about 800 people, so we've had this amazing growth. But the number one thing that we've been focused on, there's been pieces, is getting our systems and our data correct, 100% accurate. We can't improve until we have an accurate baseline of what our employee base looks like. and what our recruiting pipeline looks like. People have already mentioned on this call, the pipelines are incredibly important, but you have to know what you have coming in so that you can make the right judgment calls and funnel talent in the right directions when they come into your system. We are going to start asking employees if they feel comfortable identify themselves, so we actually know what our numbers look like. We know in some areas we've seen some definite increases in diversifying our senior ranks. When I joined a year ago, I was the only woman on the executive team. Now our executive team is 50% diverse, and it was just, let's say, not that a year ago. So we've seen some incredible progress, really just due to bringing in that, diversifying that pipeline and bringing new people to the table. Our board continues to diversify as well. We just added Regina Dugan so she has been at Facebook and Google, and she's a very senior, amazing engineer. And so now our board is about 40% diverse. We have a small board, but it's 40% female, and we're going to continue to push that as we go forward and continue to build our board. Our female manager population has also grown, but less so in the technical space. I think Esther put it well, which is like, we're making good progress, but we have a lot more to do, especially in the technical space. I'm often asked what I would do differently. Every time I take a new job, and I love to build companies, and I love to start at the beginning and then see them grow and change. And it's also an amazing way to start diversifying your employee base. But the one thing I've learned is, you get a great exec recruiting team in, it actually sources diverse talent, and then all of a sudden you bring in diverse leaders that inevitably lead to diverse teams. I think it's incredibly challenging to have diverse teams, particularly nowadays. You have candidates who are, frankly, have better and higher expectations of companies. They expect to see diverse leaders in positions of power. They expect to see women in positions of power, and they will call you out if they don't see that. If they're on a panel, they've been interviewed, and they say, I've not met one woman, that's a problem, right? And so we want to make sure that that never happens, but people are now holding that accountable. When I was in the workforce, you would never, when I started 20 years ago, you wouldn't even think, I'm sure there's many people on this call, we weren't asking those questions, or we were, but privately in our own homes. But now people are actually coming to us, which I love. But this has all allowed us to really kind of continue to focus on holding everyone accountable at the company, because we can say, look, people are asking for this. There's many jokes about millennials and wanting promotions every 10 minutes, but I think, the great thing that they've brought is a far louder voice about the importance of diversity within all levels of a company. I would say on my last point, I would say that one of the most important things that we also are focused on is not just bringing people in, but it's focusing on the talent flow within the organization, and which we do every performance cycle. We do a very deep analysis of, before we make decisions, does our pipeline and our promotions and changes and opportunities, is that exactly aligned to the population we have in-house? Are the same number of women getting through that they should be based on the population size, African Americans, Hispanics? How do we think about that? Making sure that people are applying the same standards to everyone with regards to promotion and career opportunities. And then of course, lastly, it's pay equity. There are a lot of factors that go into this, and it's critical that we look at every single person, their experience, their skills, their performance, and their role to ensure that we're paying people fairly. And that is a huge initiative within Cruise right now, and we will always continue to do that. And I think every company, we're fortunate in that we're younger, so we can get it right early. I'm sure there's a lot of companies out there that are far bigger, and it's a very complex problem to solve. So with that, thank you so much for letting me be here, and pass it back to you, Laura.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Arden, for the insight into the complex challenge it is of diversity. Whether you're listening to the voices of the millennials, leveraging an executive team, and reminding us it's not just about bringing folks in, but it's making sure that you're taking care of them through the whole of their journey in the organization. So thank you so much for that. I'm now going to turn to Darla. Hey, Darla, as the Vice President of Marketing and Custom Hospital Analytics for Intuitive, please first share with us a bit about Intuitive, and then share a bit about Intuitive's culture to recruit, retain, and reward women leaders, sort of along the lines of what Arden was referencing for us.
Yeah, thank you so much today to be able to participate with all of you. As a leader in robotic-assisted surgical and diagnostic systems, our organization serves a diverse and global community of healthcare professionals and their patients. It's important that we anchor in the principles of inclusivity. We do this both in the terms of technology design and in terms of leadership culture that we know we need to create. So we try to focus on the vital few. that we know can help us make meaningful progress over time. So I'll just give you some quick examples maybe that haven't been talked about yet today. The first is that Intuitive invests in programs, resources, and opportunities that empower women. This includes recruiting, networking, coaching, mentoring, sponsoring, both informal and formal programs. Because I think there's a misperception that career development always has to be vertical. At Intuitive, we try to provide many options. You don't have to go straight up to the top. You can have a jungle gym track, for example. And that means that you can grow through experiences in different roles and that you can be invested in along the way by various leaders. That's actually the path that I took. I've held numerous leadership positions in multiple departments, and I've just been fortunate enough to have coaches and mentors and sponsors, male and female, that have really helped me be successful at every point. And then years ago, with the support of the company, I created WISE, which is one of our employee resource group that's focused on women. And this is really great because now we can make sure that all women have a satisfying experience when they're here. It's been really interesting with this employee resource group and the programs because our customers started to recognize it. Our female surgeons and executives heard about the impact that we were having with our internal programs, and they wanted us to bring similar resources to them, and so we did. We set up programs to empower women in surgery outside the company. A lot of the work that we're doing right now is about helping them find their voice, about tapping into a female surgeon network, a robotic network, about giving them access to all of our ecosystem and our resources, and about helping them develop their personal brand using outcomes data so that they can tell their stories to their communities. It's probably no surprise to this group that healthcare, like the tech industry, is highly male-oriented, and it's often hard for these surgeons and executives to find and be heard and be taken serious. So we spend a lot of time equipping them with the tools that they need. Finally, a big part of the work, though, is to ensure that those tools are built with inclusive design principles, getting the right amount of diverse people around all of our R&D tables so that we design systems, technologies, and processes that we know will work for extremes. Let me give you just one example that I think could bring this to life today for the sake of time. You know, there's a tool called a surgical stapler. It's like an office stapler to make it easy for some of you, but it's used to close tissue during surgery. Early on in the non-robotic designs in that market, it required great hand strength to fire throughout the day in the operating room. And so what happened with that is that it became problematic if you had small hand size or if you didn't have as much strength. And so what we did when we started looking at designing the robot is we switched it up. We switched it to foot pedal. So you can now push down and it goes. It's no longer about how strong or what size you are. And this is the type of inclusive design that starts to level the playing field in surgery. You never would think about these things if everyone at the design and the research tables are all male, or if they're just from the exact same background, because it takes new ways of thinking, it takes proactive and diverse experiences at the table. And that's really, I think, the core of what Intuitive is and what we believe in. We're committed to people and we're committed to all people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great story about how the impact on the whole of the ecosystem internally with employee groups to reaching out to externally to your customers to how you think about the whole of your products. So that's a wonderful story. So thank you so much, Darla.
Thank you, Laura.
Ruth, you are the SVP of Advanced Micro Devices. It's one of the most storied companies in the history of Silicon Valley. It's also one of the few large multinational tech companies with a woman CEO of color, Lisa Su. She's often listed as one of the most effective CEOs in the world. So how does AMD and how do you work to promote an inclusive culture that is appealing to current and future women leaders?
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to everybody, the hundreds of people here with us today. It's so exciting to see everybody so engaged on the chat channel, so thank you for that. Yeah, look, I have an amazing job. I'm super lucky. I work for a great company, but I have an incredible boss and leader She is an amazing role model, and just wants to pull everybody up as we think about our company. We have a unique culture. We're very about people, very much about people. People first is deep in our culture, and we've been fostering that for the last 51 years. But we jump out of bed every day to solve some of the world's toughest problems with high performance computing. So we're very engineering centric as a company. Building a pipeline is very important as we think about the inclusive environment we want to create and generate. So it's a multi-pronged approach. Like I said, we have the privilege of having some incredible role models as we think about bringing and drawing young women into the workplace and considering engineering or business-centric opportunities. So that's important, making sure that we're out there and being obvious and active in the community, sharing some of the bad experiences, the tough experiences, not just, you know, the rosy garden and excitement that I get to have every day, but as I was growing up, right, making sure that we're sharing those experiences, making sure that employees have a very strong development plan. I learned early in my career, I was not vocal about my journey and what I aspired to and what I wanted. I assumed good things happen to people who work hard. But if people don't know what you want or where you want to go in your career, how can they help you? How can they advocate for you? Because often when you're in the workplace, you're not in the room when career decisions are sometimes being made for you. So you need an advocate in the room on your behalf. So I would really encourage everybody, no matter what stage you are in your life, to ensure that you're articulating and sharing what matters to you, what's important to you, what do you need? And then as you think about the next few years, where's the journey that you believe you're on? Because you'll get sponsors along the way. You'll get advocates, you'll have mentors along the way. That's super exciting. So we're big about that at AMD, development, making sure we know what people want and need. And then we're very engaged in the community, making sure that we're bringing up the next level of younger people, even at school level, engaged in STEM. We have the privilege of being a technology company, so we get to filter our technology so that people can learn, can be very active in the area of technology, even at a young age, so it becomes very natural and that pull and draw is there. So I would say we play to our strengths. We can't do everything, but we certainly play to the best of our strengths and utilizing those to ensure that not only we're driving a strong culture inside AMD, but we're also creating pull outside the company. And if I could just take a moment, I just wanted to call out the incredible partnership that President Chavez and Carl Gardino have had on behalf of Silicon Valley companies as we've been addressing the pandemic situation. Their partnership has been incredible. They've had many, many sleepless nights. And on behalf of AMD and all companies in the Valley, thank you so much. And please keep up the good work.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you so much. And really centering us around culture and how important it is in making sure that we have access to others. We get the injustices of this world addressed, and it really can drive a better future for us all. Let me now turn to Lena as the SVP and General Manager for KLA. Tell us briefly about the company and your role within it. Then please also share the role of affinity groups or other means to further diversity, equity, and inclusion at KLA.
Thank you, Laura. Let me start by saying I'm so excited to be participating in this event and to have the ability to have this event virtually. I think a lot of our companies that we work in Silicon Valley enable this virtual environment and make the ability for all of us to have and be fortunate to have Zoomable jobs. KLA is a $5 billion global tech company where we build capital equipment that semiconductor companies use to test the quality of the devices that are on our phones, on webcams, on the networks that are actually supporting the Zoom conference we're on right now. Affinity groups. Affinity groups, or employee resource groups as we call them, are groups that we feel at KLA provide an opportunity for our employees to have a voice. The groups call attention to many gaps that we have and highlight areas that we can improve. I currently serve as the executive sponsor for our ERG group for women called WISE. I think that Darla, you also said your group is called WISE. It stands for Women in STEM and Power. And we spent a long time, by the way, going through different names where we're going to call ourselves. But we really needed to look at what our mission and vision was going to be. And our mission and vision is to create more opportunities for women at KLA with programs that help connect, communicate, and mentor our employees across the company. I spend a lot of time trying to mentor younger women coming on board. And I didn't do it at the beginning of my career. At the beginning of my career, I was like so focused, oh, I don't want to be differentiated for being a woman. I'm just one of the guys. And I mean, a tech company, there's a lot of dominance with men there. But as I was growing and I was growing with and developing within KLA, I realized I need to help others. So I'm really excited to be heading ERG for women and trying to make a change. For our D&I initiatives, there's 2 areas of focus: recruiting and retention of diverse talent. I will not spend a lot of time on recruiting. There's a lot of work being done to improve. Arden also mentioned a lot of the common challenges that we face as we're trying to recruit diverse talent. My focus is more on retention, because I think it's important to point out, once we have a diverse team, to make sure that we're leveraging that team. And I think we lose sight of that. We need to make sure that the team members that come on board have an opportunity to talk and say what they think, and so that we can hear the different points of views. Otherwise, we're not leveraging our diversity. And I think that's a topic that at times we're not really focusing on, because there's so much focus on recruiting, building the diverse team. But are we really creating an environment where that diverse team is giving back to the organization? Many things on the literature show how an organization benefits from being diverse. And I do think that during this challenging time, we can set an example of a more even playing field for diverse employees, remote global employees, and people that would otherwise be overpowered by not being heard. And let me explain what I mean. I think Zoom provides a forum where people can take turns to talk, and you can raise your hand and make sure that you're listening to the points of views from everyone on the team. So I think that it gives us all an opportunity to set the example as leaders, and especially as diverse leaders in our organizations. I would close by saying that our tech industry still has a lot of work to do, both for gender and racial diversity. And although we're making progress, we're still at the early stages of making a change for our tech companies.
Thank you so much, Lena, and thank you all panelists. I wish we had time for questions, but we don't. But I got to tell you, the bottom line for me is women change everything, and I'm so glad to be a part of this panel of super wonderful women leaders. So now with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Tracy Lee from Lyft.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, panelists, for that uplifting and engaging conversation. My name is Tracy Lee, and I am a Senior Public Policy Manager at Lyft, and it is our honor to serve as a branded sponsor for today's dialogue and conversation. These amazing panelists remind me that each of us has a role and even a responsibility to engage in efforts that uplift women and girls. Whether it's our efforts at work, in our communities, our schools, or in our homes, let's always remember that both our words and our actions have impact. I want to thank our moderator, Laura Clayton McDonnell of ServiceNow, and our amazing panelists, Esther Lem of Chegg, Arden Hoffman of Cruise, Darla Hutton of Intuitive, Lena Nicoletis of KLA, Ruth Cotter of AMD, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, and County Board President Cindy Chavez. Your individual and collective impact is impressive as well as inspiring. Back to Carl.
Tracy Lee of Lyft, thank you so much for your inspiring remarks and the work that you do here in our region. It is such an honor to work with and for you through the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Again, my name's Carl Guardino. I have the honor of serving as CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We want to thank all of you for participating with us today. I want to mention that character is built not only when everything goes well, but character is built when things don't always go well. And we want to let you all know that our next keynote speaker, the amazing House of Representatives member Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, was pulled into a committee meeting for marking up legislation. So she will not be able to be with us as long as we had hoped, and she had hoped to be with us today. She's going to be doing her best to step out of that committee markup, but she is doing the people's business for which she is elected to serve her district, our state, and our nation, and we could not be more proud of Congressmember Karen Bass. So she will be again trying to join us during this panel, just not as long as we had anticipated. I do want to bring to your attention, though, something that has been alluded to a few times, especially by Board President Cindy Chavez of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. And that's the work that we're doing together as communities, as companies, to make sure that our frontline hospital workers and their patients through the COVID crisis have the medical equipment and supplies that they need to stay as safe as possible during these extraordinarily challenging times of the global pandemic. To date, through the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, you have blessed us with more than $8,553,000 with medical equipment and supplies, both cash and in kind. We have been informed by our public, private, and nonprofit hospitals throughout greater Silicon Valley that over the next 30 days, the need is urgent for 300,000 disposable hospital gowns. Those gowns are $7 a gown. We have more than 600 powerful women leaders and some men like myself in this town hall today. We're going to ask you to use the chat box or text me directly if you can help meet this need. My wife Leslie and I have been contributing throughout this crisis. I'm sure many of you have as well, as individuals, as employers, as employer foundations. We're going to ask you to step up again to stand with our frontline hospital workers. And whether you can text me or put in the chat box for 1 gown at $7 or 10 gowns at $70 or 100 gowns at $700, we're hoping you'll step up immediately so that we can help meet this need real time. My wife and I will go ahead and underwrite another 10 gowns at $70. If you can match me, put it in the chat. If you can send me a text, we will let people know later as well. But let's meet the needs in this crisis. We are going to continue on now with our amazing panel, again, that we believe and hope that Representative Bass will be able to join us for by stepping out of a committee of the House of Representatives as they mark up legislation. Will you please join me in welcoming the Senior Vice President and General Manager for 3D Sensing of Lumentum, headquartered right here in San Jose, California, Taya Williams. Taya, thank you.
Thank you, Carl. There you go. My video started. I was getting a funky message that the video couldn't start. It's such a pleasure to join everyone. I've been reading through the participant list, and I'm just honored to be in the presence of 517 participants as of now. and such a distinguished list of speakers and panelists. So thank you for making me part of this event. It is a pity to hear about Congresswoman not being available. I had heard so much about the story, and I was looking forward to her sharing it with everyone. And I hear now, I'm getting some text that she may be available. So to make sure that we make the best use of her time, without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our moderator, Annabelle Chang. For those of you that joined us a bit earlier, Annabelle is the Vice President of the Bay Area with Alaska Airlines. She's former Deputy District Attorney and a distinguished civic leader. So I want to make sure that I invite Annabelle to have a conversation with the Congresswoman before introducing the rest of the panelists, to make sure that we make the best use of our time. Annabelle, will you please join me?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to see if Congresswoman Bass is on. If you are, just go ahead and hop on the camera briefly and we'll know to get ready for you.
Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We don't see you yet.
The app is not letting me.
Oh, here.
Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I can start now.
We'll give you a minute while I do a quick introduction. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Congresswoman Bass. We are delighted to have you join as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and we want to be respectful of your time. So we will kick it off to you first, but let me do just a quick intro. Names like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks have really awoken the American population to the experience that many Black Americans and people of color experience every single day. I read in the New York Times that we've had 15 to 26 million people come out in their communities and march in support of Black Lives Matter, possibly making it the largest movement in US history, which is really remarkable because we are living that right now. So Congresswoman Bass, and also former California State Assembly Speaker, we are delighted to have you, and we would love to hear some thoughts that you may have on how we can help support your efforts, and talk a little bit about what's happening at the federal level and what you think we can do at the state and local level as well.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. As Carl mentioned, I snuck, I'm hiding in a room right now. I snuck away from our vote so that I could come and be with you for a few minutes, but I have always admired the work of the leadership group. I am used to seeing you here on the Hill, so unfortunately it won't be this year, but I'm hoping that it will be next year. So thank you for all of your great work that you do. It really is an incredible time period. I feel like it has been a seismic shift in the consciousness of people in the United States. We've seen these shootings and killings and even chokeholds for a number of years now. But I think that the murder of George Floyd was just so horrendous, and everybody saw it over 8 long minutes, that it just tipped people over the edge. And I will tell you, because of all of the millions of people that have been out, that has pushed Congress to act, because Congress can either act in 30 years or 30 days. And when the people act, that moves Congress to act. And so we came together and did the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I'm just going to go over 3 quick pieces. Part of it is accountability, because right now it's very hard to sue, prosecute, or fire a police officer. That's why the officer was looking at the camera while he was killing George Floyd, because he thought he was going to act with impunity. We also are supporting police departments by calling for national accreditation. If you think about it, you need to have accreditation and licensing to be a hairdresser or a barber, but you don't to be a police officer. And a lot of police departments and police organizations have been fighting for national standards for years and years. And so we're trying to impose that on a federal level, because that will help upgrade the profession overall. We also want a registry so that bad officers won't go from police department to police department, because that's what they do now. They hop around and don't disclose their backgrounds. And then finally, We also are providing grants to community-based organizations so they can look at the resources that they have in the community and decide whether or not the balance is correct. What people here can do, what people in the Leadership Council can do, is to really push the Senate to act, because we passed the bill out of the House and now it is languishing in the Senate. And we passed it, it was a bipartisan bill. The other thing that people can do, and everybody can do this no matter what community you live in, look at your own community. How is policing done there? Maybe it's something that you're not aware of. Is the arrest and the incarceration rate appropriate, proportionate to the population? Look at your high schools and middle schools. What about the suspension and expulsion rate? Because that's where it all starts. And so I think all of us can take responsibility, but I'm so happy after dealing with this issue for so many years, there now seems to be a national awareness about the problem.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. And we are going to give your time back so you can do the nation's work.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And I'm going to return it back to Taya or Carl.
Thank you so much. And Representative Bass, we are just so honored that you stepped out of a House committee meeting marking up legislation to join us. Your work when you were Speaker of the State Assembly, when you received the John F. Kennedy Courage Award for your work in helping manage us through the steep economic downturn of 2008 through 2010, and now your courageous work on Capitol Hill is deeply appreciated by all of us. Thank you, bless you, Godspeed.
Absolutely. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And I'm going to turn it back over to our friend, such an amazing leader, Annabelle Chang, to moderate this panel. And I want to remind all of our guests, hundreds on this line participating, for the Congress member to step out like that just underscores how much she respects each of you and the work that we are doing together for racial justice and equity. Annabelle Chang, back to you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you, Taya, for helping us keep it brief and make sure that we could get Congresswoman Bass in briefly. So as you can see, we have the panelists Karen Taylor, Hannah Gordon, Quita Highsmith, and Raquel Gonzalez on the panel. And I am going to start with Hannah. Hannah is the Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel of the Niners. And as you can guess, she is also one of the highest ranking females in the NFL. And I've had the pleasure to share a stage with her before, and it's nice to share a virtual stage again. So part of today's celebration of women leaders is to celebrate and commemorate the 19th Amendment. While we have come a long way in the past 100 years, we still have a long way to go in terms of culture for our country. And so, Hannah, I'd love for you to share with us how you professionally or personally engaged in efforts to advance racial justice and equity that our guests here may not know about.
Sure. Well, first, thank you all so much for having me. And we're so lucky that we got to hear from Congressmember Bass. That was really wonderful. I feel like for me, my call has really been to remind other white women and white men that racism is our issue and it's our responsibility to solve it because we created it. And I'll try to be concise, but I think they dropped in the chat. If you're interested in learning about all the things that the 49ers are doing, please do follow us at 49ers Community. We only have about 60 seconds to answer these questions, and I could not possibly tell you all the things we're doing in 60 seconds. And then on a personal level, I think they're also dropping in the chat the letter that I wrote to hundreds of colleagues, friends, family, regarding what we can all do as white people for racial justice. And I post regularly on that as well, if you follow me. And I would say, I would like to use this time really to speak to, for all the white women watching, I think that we have a particular responsibility and also a unique position to leverage our privilege for allyship. And that's for three reasons. First, we will never have gender equality without racial equality. And we need to recognize that we are the ones who've benefited the most from the gender equality movement, and that our experience is not the monolithic female experience. So we really need to have women of color at the table. Really, every panel should look like the panel that we're on right now in every venue that we're in. And so often that doesn't happen, as well as in our boardrooms, et cetera. Second, I think that we are in a unique position to recognize this because we do have an experience of understanding inequality, right? We know what it's like to feel unsafe, either in our own homes or when we leave our homes. We know what it's like to feel passed over for promotion or that we don't earn as much as our male counterparts. And so that should give us the empathy to understand what is somebody else's experience of racial inequality. And by empathy, I don't mean white fragility and white tears. I don't mean we're going to sit here and cry and say, oh, that's so sad, I'm so sorry. I mean, how do we use that for action? How do we say, I can understand what this experience would be like, and now what am I going to do about it? Because I also think there's a real danger that as coastal, liberal, well-educated white women, that we say, oh, racism is out there. Racism is something that exists somewhere else that I'm not a part of. And the reality is we are all a part of it. And then the last reason that I think that we are uniquely positioned to be allies is our access to white men. The reality is white men are our fathers, our brothers, and often our husbands and our sons. And so we need to really exert the influence that we have within our families and our communities for racial justice.
Thank you, Hannah, and I really appreciate your sharing that personal perspective. I'd like to move to one of our speakers, Quita Highsmith. She is the Chief Diversity Officer for Genentech, and she's actually done some really exciting things in patient inclusion and highlighting oncological, I pronounced that incorrectly, oncological disparities. And I wanted to highlight that SVLG has a new mantra, really, which is speak up, stand up, and step up. And step up means for us as employers that we need to take a hard look at our internal practices, whether it's promotion, hiring, compensation, or who sits in our board of directors. So we'd love to lean on Quita's experience and say, what can you do? What can we do as companies? And what is Genentech doing to be more transparent in these types of areas?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you to Silicon Valley Leadership Group for bringing this conversation forward, right? This is an important conversation for us to have right now, and not only once, but continue to have the conversation over and over again. For those that don't know, Genentech is the founder of the biotech industry, and we take diversity and inclusion very seriously. When this role came up, I wanted to ensure that, and the company did, that it reported to the CEO. So we had a seat at the table because we all know diversity and inclusion is multifaceted, it's complex, and there are a whole host of issues and there is no magic solve. But having a seat at the table is one of the ways that we move forward. And for us, we've been thinking about diversity and inclusion in 3 areas: foster belonging, advance inclusive research, and transform society. And so under foster belonging, we've been much more transparent, sharing our data with our internal employee population about the opportunities that we have for Latinx and African-American employees. And we have to be intentional, right? Like, it's just not enough to say, okay, we're gonna do better. What are we gonna actually do? And I'm very proud of the work that we've done with women leaders, especially at our officer and director ranks, the most senior roles, because we're near equity at that level. But we have work to do around Black and Latinx, and representation is one lever. As we think about internal practices, we must embed diversity and inclusion in every aspect of the business. And one of the things that I'm very happy to share, and one person can raise their hand and make a difference. Myself and another woman at the company, we noticed that the majority of the clinical research was done on patients of European backgrounds. And so we started an initiative called Advancing Inclusive Research. And fast forward to today, all of us have seen the inequities in healthcare that communities of color face around COVID. And one of the barriers is a lack of access and participation into clinical trials. And so with our initiative, Advancing Inclusive Research, we were very intentionally able to move quickly at the intersection of COVID and the hotspots around underrepresented populations. One of our key trials that we enroll patients in was in Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans. And everybody knows New Orleans is a very diverse community. And so we had not traditionally gone to Ochsner in New Orleans to do our clinical research, but because of this initiative around advancing inclusive research, not only were we able to enroll in New Orleans, but we have a second study where we're enrolling patients across the US in communities of color. When we think about the East Bay, we're also thinking about Native Americans. We just went for the first time ever in our history into Kenya. We're doing clinical work in Brazil and Mexico. And it takes investment to make change. And I'm a true believer that you budget what you value. And I'm happy to say that our CEO, my boss, and the Chief Financial Officer have been very supportive of our broad initiative. And I'm very happy about the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Quita. And I think it's super timely. I mean, we are, as you said, in the middle of a global pandemic that has had disproportionate impacts on our communities of color. And it's shocking to hear how much how far we need to go, but we're thankful for your leadership at Genentech in raising this and making sure that communities of color do not continue to be left behind. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. And if you want to share further, please feel free to drop some information into the chat, because I'm sure a lot of us will want to dig through that. I also want to go to Karen Taylor, who is the Chief Diversity Officer of Workday, and she is a very seasoned diversity and inclusion leader. And I also noted that she sits on the board of Watermark, one of my favorite women's leadership conferences, which has elevated incredible women on stage and given them an opportunity to speak out about issues facing us. So Karen, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what diversity inclusion means, particularly for a place like Workday, in a tech company. How do you approach the challenge in this world of making sure that we have diversity inclusion when there are very highly specialized set of skills that you're looking for in employees? And if anyone else wants to hop in too, I'd love to hear that perspective. Karen, I will hop it over to you.
Great, thanks Annabelle. And thanks Hannah for your candor, and Quita, always great to see you, my old mate from Genentech. And thank you, leadership group, for actually having me. So look, I mean, we're all familiar with the challenges that tech companies have around diversity and inclusion, and particularly challenges of hiring and advancing women and people of color. And we need to make sure that as we're thinking about the work that we're doing in our companies, that we are doing our best to make sure that people belong. And so Workday has reinforced our commitment to making significant progress in this area. And personally, I believe there are two really critical elements to making progress in our D&I efforts right now. The first is focus, and the second is intent. We must be hyper-focused in our efforts to create more racial and gender balance in our workplaces, and we must be intentional about our efforts to really create systemic change by focusing on the outcomes that we really want to see. I think we can no longer be passive when it comes to the change that needs to happen. We need to be focused, and we need to be intentional about the change that we need to see. At Workday, our focus is really around something that we call VIBE. VIBE stands for value, inclusion, belonging, and equity for all. And we really do mean for all. And as we think about that in the context of VIBE, we're really talking about, do you value diverse representation? Do you value uniqueness? Do you value inclusion, belonging, and equity? And so VIBE is really, it's both our vision and our strategy, and it's how we focus internally on making sure that we can make an impact on belonging and diversity. And so with our efforts, we're making sure that we're ensuring that we have a good focus on equity at every stage of the employee life cycle. It's not just good enough to bring people into the company. You've got to find a way to make sure that people want to stay there as well. One of the ways in which we focus on the retention piece is really thinking about that piece around belonging. So we understand that belonging is personal, and it's personal for every employee. Just because you have a culture of inclusion doesn't necessarily mean that every single person feels like they belong in that culture. You've got to make sure that you're getting down to the experiences of really your employees, so that you can bring out the best in every one of your employees. For us, it's also important that we listen to our employees and we take into consideration what their experiences are. And to Hannah's point earlier, every experience of a woman is not the same experience. When you bring in intersectionality, you start to recognize that people have different experiences. So Black women or Latinx women may be having a very different experience than what your white women are having. And you've got to make sure that you're listening to your employees, because not only are they the voices of your workforce, they're also the voices of your communities. And I think they can really help us to better understand what are those issues that they're really being impacted by. And then the last thing that I'll mention is really our recent commitments on supporting social justice causes. You know, we've recently decided to donate $10 million to social justice. A lot of the work that Congresswoman Bass is doing, really, by us donating that, it really allows us to contribute to some of the real issues that are being tackled out there. We're also taking a hard look inside, like we're looking internal into our own company to see what type of systemic change really needs to be made, and how are we continuing to create this culture of vibe that I talked about. So including, and that means really thinking about how do we better understand, how do we hire, develop, and retain diverse talent? How do we continue focusing on belonging? How do we think about our products and our technology, and our products and technology inclusive as well? And also, how do we support our communities? One of the things that I'm super proud about that we've done is actually brought together a 20-person accelerator team to really press the pedal on our efforts around diversity and inclusion. And how can we really bring our community together to accelerate our efforts in what we're trying to do? We recognize that, you know, there are a lot of disparities in the workplace, but we need to make sure that we are intentionally focused on making sure that we make that change. And we also need to make sure that we're transparent. So we'll be sharing our journey along the way, both internally and externally, really so we can think about how do we hold ourselves accountable to what we're saying we're going to do. And so, you know, as we think about where we're focused in terms of the donation part, you know, that $10 million donation that our CEO, Anil Bhusri, announced a couple of weeks ago will allow us to continue supporting some of the efforts mentioned by Congresswoman Bass, as well as us focusing on issues of workforce empowerment. So it's very holistic. There are a lot of moving points, as Quita alluded to, and it's very layered, it's complex, but the last thing that I'll say before turning it back over to you, Annabelle, is it's going to take every single one of us. It's not just your CEO's job, it's not just your CDO's job, it's not just Congresswoman Bass and what we need to do from a policy standpoint. It's going to take all of us to make change and think about what are the decisions that we need to make personally differently to make sure that we can contribute to that systemic change that needs to happen.
Thank you, Karen, and kudos to Workday for that $10 million contribution. And we look forward to learning more about the causes and organizations that you support. For all of us as employers and companies, we're always looking to partner with nonprofits. And I would like to echo your point about listening to each other and understanding that everyone's experience is different. At Alaska Airlines, we've been hosting listening sessions with our CEO and our president, and it's gone from, you know, high-level executive management all the way through our frontline employees to our pilots, and everyone has such totally different experiences, and it's important to keep that in mind, particularly for workforces that have very, very different job functions. So thank you for highlighting that. I'd also now like to go to Raquel Gonzalez at Bank of America. She's the market president for San Mateo and Santa Clara. She is a true leader, board member of SVLG, the chair of the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley, and a 2019 Latino Leadership Award winner from the Silicon Valley Business Journal. There are many organizations and individuals in our country that have been on the forefront of racial justice, including the Hispanic Foundation. And we'd like to hear from you, Raquel, about the different organizations that you've been working with and individuals that you have partnered with to help advance some of this change. And if you could go ahead and share, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. And can you hear me okay? Fantastic. To accelerate our efforts, we recently made 3 really important announcements that I want to share. The first is a commitment of $1 billion over 4 years to advance racial equality and economic opportunity, really focusing on helping create opportunity for people and community of color. And the focus really extends across four areas: health and healthcare, jobs, which includes reskilling, support for small businesses, and affordable housing. And we're doing all of this with a lens on racial equality. The second is a $25 million commitment to help with a new initiative at the Smithsonian Institution. And this initiative will explore how Americans currently understand, experience, and confront race, and the impact that this has on communities, as well as how this impact helps shape our future. This will create dialogue as we continue to seek solutions to build a more inclusive future. You know, I really feel that the more that we can sustain this dialogue, the more likely that we will be to identify a path forward that removes the barriers that communities of color have faced for far too long. And then thirdly, a partnership that we are forming with iHeartMedia, and the sponsorship is we're sponsoring, the Black Information Network, which is the first and the only service airing 24/7 comprehensive news audio for the Black community. So we're really proud of these initiatives and what the initiatives will allow us to do to continue to make impact. And as I said, right, to really help us advance the work that needs to be done together, as everyone has said, to really impact communities of color, people of color, and giving them the opportunity that they deserve to continue to drive economic mobility within those segments.
Thank you. And I look forward to learning more about the Black Information Network. Do we know if that's launching this year or early next year, or is it already in effect?
It is launching this year, and I am happy to give you more details.
Awesome. That's fantastic news. Well, we actually have some time for some questions, and let me start with one question that we received from Sharon of City Year. She says, I appreciate the interest in adding women and people of color into the pipeline. How do we develop the diverse talent that already exists in Silicon Valley? And how do we harness the talent of our young people in East San Jose? And let me open that up to any of the panelists who would like to chime in. And maybe I will make a plug here, actually. So I know we have one of our community partners, the African American Community Services Agency, based right in San Jose, which is the largest African American services agency in Northern California. And they host several leadership programs. And this year they made it into a virtual one. And part of that is training young people. And so it's focused largely on the Black and Latinx communities, young people, to get ready for the professional workforce, and even thinking about things like budget and finance and personal branding on LinkedIn. So that's one organization that we're happy to share. If any of you guys have any organizations that you'd like to highlight, please do.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. One organization that I will highlight is Europe, and Europe is actually focused on building workforce empowerment for younger folks who may not have a traditional background. So Europe is doing a great job of actually educating and training some of these young professionals with technology skills that will enable them to get really good technology jobs right off the bat early in their career, specifically for people, when I talk about non-traditional backgrounds, particularly those who may not come with a degree. And so doing work like that and acknowledging that there's still great talent out there, even for people who may not have a degree, I think is one area. The other thing that I'll say, and this is, I think, internal, that we can be doing right now, when we bring racially diverse people into our companies, we need to not just bring them in, but start them off with a development plan from day one to make sure that they have that traction, they have that mentorship, they have that ability to learn and grow, and see that support early on when they join the company, not just at the point, of 3 or 4 years down the road.
And so I'll jump in here as well. One of the organizations that I used to be on the board of is called Girls for a Change. And this is an organization that is for predominantly Black girls to give them an opportunity to think about different career paths. The other thing that we're doing at Genentech, and I would encourage everyone to consider, is an initiative that we call From Kindergarten to Careers. So K to Careers, where we're thinking about how do we make investments in STEM education? How do some of our scientists teach at universities that are highly representative of underrepresented people? And then also bringing people in for paid internships, because a lot of students of color, they can't afford not to get paid during their internships. So paid internships for undergraduate, postdoctorate programs that we're sponsoring at Genentech so people can get experience in the workplace.
Thank you, Quita. And what we'll have Vince Rocha do is actually send out the links to the organizations to all of the attendees, since we've been receiving some questions about it. One last question for the group. What are each of the companies doing to retain talent? And I will say, I learned a really interesting fact is that in general, most companies have about 5% turnover every year. So when you're trying to diversify the ranks, you know, you only impact it by 5% potentially at the most every year. So retaining that talent and fostering inclusion is incredibly important. So I'd love to hear any of you share some of that expertise and experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's Karen. I think, again, you have to start with your workforce internally, and you have to start, I'm gonna go back to listening to your employees. They will tell you exactly what they need. And addressing those needs of your workforce is going to help you best understand what it's going to take to retain them. But you can't start talking to your employees about retention and what's going to keep them to stay when they're ready to walk out the door. They've made up their mind 10 months before they're ready to walk out the door, before they actually do it. So staying connected to them through their entire journey is going to be what's going to allow you to know what's going to actually retain your employees. You have to do that connection with them and make sure you're listening and addressing their needs.
Thank you, Karen.
Annabelle, I'll add as well to what Karen has said. I agree with everything. And I think the other piece that I like to add is just the focus that we need to have on creating opportunities for women. And at Bank of America, I mean, we're proud of how long we have been committed to providing women with opportunities to grow and develop. But we're proud today, while we've made really great progress, we still have work to do, but we're proud that today, women in our company make up over 35% of our board of directors, 50% of our global workforce, 45% of our global management team, and 40% of managers across the company. So good progress. We still have to continue to hold ourselves accountable, as again, everyone has said today. But as long as we are thinking that this is something, it's an imperative, it's a business initiative that makes sense for us, it makes sense for our clients, and we owe it to our women, our female associates, to continue to give them those opportunities.
Thank you. And I want to stay on time, but we want to recognize this group for their incredible expertise and contributions to the community, whether it's Bank of America, Workday, Genentech, or the 49ers. All of you have really opened up your hearts today and shared not only what your companies are doing, but what you're also personally doing. So thank you for joining us on this panel. And we're super glad that Congresswoman Bass was able to join and share. Just as a reminder, she is one of the sponsors and authors of the Justice let me get this right, Justice in Policing Act of 2020. So take a time to look it up and see what the progress on that legislation is. Thank you, and I will return it back to Carl.
Annabelle Chang and this amazing panel of leaders, thank you so much for inspiring and engaging us today. It is truly my pleasure to introduce a friend of more than 20 years, the Director of Corporate Affairs for Synopsys, Erin Guzman. Erin? If we can make sure to take Erin off of mute.
Carl, can you see me? I'm here.
We can now see and hear you. Erin Guzman, thank you for joining us. We're turning it over to you.
Thank you, Carl. And hello, I am Erin Guzman, And on behalf of Synopsys and this virtual room of incredible leaders, I just want to say thank you. And thank you so much, Carl. I really echo your comments about Congresswoman Bass. I truly believe she is the right person at the right place at the right time for our country. And I do want to thank this incredible panel. I mean, I just wanted to hear so much more, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that. The leadership, expertise, and your transparency to these matters has been phenomenal for all of us to learn more about. I want to thank Hannah Gordon, Raquel Gonzalez, Quita Highsmith, Karen Taylor, and our amazing moderator, Annabelle Chang. You are truly change makers. I also want to say that, as you know, I should say as a white woman, I could easily say that what really stuck with me, Hannah, was the no gender equality without racial equality. And that's something that I find to be just very inspiring. I also want to say, as Congresswoman Bass said, you know, look at your own community. I wanted to get it right. Look at your own community. And I should say at Synopsys, we really believe that during these times demand our attention, they demand our action, and they demand our compassion. And now is not the time for us to stay silent. And lastly, Carl, it has been a great journey the last 20 years, and I will sincerely miss working with you. Thank you, and I will turn it back to Carl.
Erin Guzman, thank you. Thank you for the amazing leadership of Art DeGius, the co-founder and co-CEO of Synopsys, and the leadership that you have provided for our region and state for decades.
Thank you.
As we bring forward our final powerful panel of speakers, please do not forget to ask your questions by using the chat box function, or even easier for me, to send me a text directly at 408-838-4848. Again, my number is 408-838-4848, so that we can continue to get as many of your questions asked to our amazing panelists as we can. And please, let's not forget in this global pandemic that there is a reason why we did not have a surge that crippled our professional frontline hospital and healthcare workers, our public, private, and nonprofit hospitals, and the customers and the patients that they are valiantly serving. It's because you all stepped up with more than $8 million in cash and in kind for critical supplies and equipment for those hospital and healthcare workers. And they need us again now. Please match my donation, make your own, use the chat box. A single hospital gown is only $7. That's one big Starbucks cup of coffee. If you can do 10 gowns, 100 gowns, 1,000 gowns through your company, individually, through your company foundation, please, let's step up and stand up for our hospital workers. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce my colleague, Angelica Cortez, our Director of Investor Relations and Strategic Coalitions for the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Angelica?
Thank you, Carl, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Such an amazing way to start our days together, to elevate all of our collective consciousness. So I am pleased to share that 1 year ago, when the Silicon Valley Leadership Group envisioned our year-long celebration of women to commemorate the 100th anniversary of when women earned the right to vote in the United States, we asked ourselves a couple of what-if questions. What if we could secure the first woman speaker of the United States House of Representatives for the kickoff celebration on August 26th of 2019? Thanks to Congressmember Anna Eshoo, we were able to do so. And what if we could secure documentary filmmaker, actress, philanthropist, and the first partner of California, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, as the final speaker for today's celebration? How fortunate we are to have set our goals so high, and thanks to the generosity of Jennifer Siebel Newsom to achieve this goal. This amazing leader is the director, writer, and producer of the 2011 film, Miss Representation, and the 2015 film, The Mask You Live In. Jennifer earned her BA and MBA from Stanford University, where she graduated with honors. She has traveled extensively to Africa, Latin America, and Europe with Conservation International, a global environmental coalition, and worked with rainforest communities with a focus on helping Indigenous people and creating business enterprise opportunities for women. Jennifer Siebel-Newsom will engage in our fireside chat, co-moderated by eBay General Counsel Marie O. Huber and Bloom Energy Chief People Officer Sanja Wilkerson. I pass the mic to both of you.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hello, and thank you for this tremendous opportunity to be a part of the dialogue with all these amazing, inspiring women. So, welcome, First Partner Newsom, to our fireside chat. Sonia and I are delighted to co-host this conversation with you. Let me start by asking you, what compelled you to produce, write, and direct 2011 award-winning documentary, Miss Representation? What impact do you believe it has made in the past decade since its release?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. Thank you, Carl, also for your invitation. I want to share that, Miss Representation was really birthed out of my experience in the entertainment industry, post Stanford Business School, where I realized that there were not only a dearth of women in front of the camera, but a dearth of women behind the camera telling stories that properly reflected women. And I was in the industry when Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, and Lindsay Lohan were all tabloid fodder. I couldn't imagine raising a daughter, a girl, in a climate that so ridiculed and rejected and diminished women and girls. I met my husband at the time, who was the mayor of San Francisco. And when we first met, he introduced me to really powerful women in the political world. And I started to question why the media wasn't properly representing powerful women and only saw women as powerful in terms of their youth, beauty, and sexuality. And so I committed to making the documentary Miss Representation with my dear friend and longtime partner, Regina Kulik-Skelly. And we premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, sold out, standing room only audiences, lines outside the door. And it was just this cult-like film that took off. And I knew that with the film, that we had more than a film, because people were inquiring for ongoing conversation and action and education. And so we birthed the Representation Project, which is a 501c3 organization that has not only carried forward the education and communications and social activism around the films, but has launched campaigns like Not Buying It and Ask for More, which Not Buying It's really been a part of transforming the representations of women and girls in advertising, not just during the Super Bowl, but beyond, and been credited for that. And similarly, we've been credited for transforming really not just the representation of women on the red carpet, such that hosts and personalities aren't allowed to ask women who they're wearing or what they're wearing or focus solely on their youth, beauty, and sexuality, but really need to see these actresses and directors and filmmakers as fully realized, talented human beings with interests and hobbies just like the men. And so we've really been credited for empowering women in the industry to really stand up and demand equal pay and ask to be treated with respect and civility and as equals, which has all contributed in a broader way to the Me Too and Time's Up movement, so that we've been really proud to be a part of.
Great. Thank you very much. So first, I'd like to say I'm just honored and delighted to co-moderate this session with you. And it was really fun getting to know you. Just, learning about your background is absolutely amazing. So first partner of California, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. It's so nice to speak with you today. So, in looking at your background and learning more about you, I'm sure that many people were surprised to know that you did work with Indigenous women in the rainforest. And by the way, I love the diversity of the work you've done with women. It's quite amazing. I'm an executive with Bloom Energy, and our mission is to provide clean, affordable, efficient energy for everyone. And certainly the environment is a passion of mine personally, as well as the organization that I work for. I'm interested in how you became involved in the environmental cause, especially related to women's issues.
Oh, great, thank you. You know what's really interesting actually is I think I came to the environmental movement before I recognized how much I cared about women and empowering women and families. And I feel like I'm moving back and sort of integrating the two, and I'll get to that. But so when I was 14, a girlfriend and I decided we wanted to start a conservation international club at our high school. And we ended up spending the summer working in La Amistad Biosphere Reserve in Costa Rica and a little bit in Panama. And it was just like a completely eye-opening experience for me. And I was addicted, I was committed to being an environmentalist. You know, my connection with nature goes back further. When my sister died, I ended up, as a way to sort of grieve and heal, nature became my sanctuary and really my reprieve. And so I've carried that with me, and I think that sort of was one of the reasons I was so drawn to you know, the environment and becoming a conservationist, and really committed to making sure that we preserve Mother Nature for future generations because of the benefits that that being in nature provided to me as a child. When I was in college, I continued working for Conservation International. I worked for them in Southern Africa and Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. I worked on peace parks, helping work with the government and the private sector to create peace parks so wildlife could roam from a national park through, you know, not having to go through a city but through these sort of migration corridors and be protected. I also worked on ecotourism initiatives, but mostly was invested in working with Indigenous women, recognizing both in my work in Africa and Latin America, that when women had their own occupations and jobs, they took that money and they put it back into their children's nutrition, into a safe home and shelter, and into, you know, their health needs of their families. So I was really, that's sort of when I began to connect more with, you know, women, and as a result of that, I think post Stanford Business School went into sort of more of a focus in the entertainment industry on women and women's empowering women and women's leadership. But ironically, now that I'm in this First Partners office, it's kind of coming full circle. So our focus out of the First Partners office is really gender equity and healthy whole children. And two of our initiatives in the healthy whole children arena really kind of bring me back to the environment and equity. One is a Pathways to Park initiative, where we are committed to reminding California kids that these are their parks, and empowering their families and their schools and their after school, you know, and organizations and support communities to enable them to have access to the parks, because these are their parks, and we all know the social and emotional benefits of spending more time in nature. And during COVID-19, we've been advocating to make sure that our parks stay open for kids. And then similarly, we've also worked really strongly, and I'm leading a task force, an interagency task force on a farm to school initiative to ensure that we are partnered not just with the schools to make sure that the schools are sourcing directly from local, ideally organic, or moving on the scale towards regenerative farmers, so that the kids can get healthy, fresh, nutritious food. As we know, many kids, that's their most nutritious meal if when they're in school. And so we've also, we see the benefit obviously to the environment when we focus on empowering and uplifting local economies and local farmers, especially those that are moving towards the regenerative farming practice. So those are just two of the things that we're doing, connecting my work with women and families and the environment. And I do have a documentary that I intend to make in the next, I don't know how many years, but connecting women and Mother Nature and really just gender and the environment.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Back
you.
to you, Marie.
Thanks for your work at Bloom. Oh my goodness, we love you. You have been such a savior to California. We're so grateful.
Thank you very much. We are just pleased to help and just so proud of being able to participate and make a difference for California. So we really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, but thank you for sharing that important work with us, First Partner. So now I'm going to pivot for a little bit because we're here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And Jennifer, you serve as commissioner on the Federal Suffrage Centennial Commission. You're appointed by Speaker Pelosi, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about why you think it's important to celebrate the suffrage centennial. And tell us a little bit about what the commission has planned.
Great, thank you. So, this was an incredible opportunity to serve on the National Suffrage Centennial Commission. I'm a firm believer that our history has not properly reflected women's contributions, especially women of color's contributions, and that this is sort of a larger example of how we as society have devalued women and again, women's contributions to society outside of the home. And so the centennial for me was really about uplifting those stories of all the women and a few good men who really fought for suffrage. We know that, early on in the suffrage movement, the suffragists and the abolitionists were working closely together. And with the passing of the 14th Amendment, there was some tension. And unfortunately, with the ratification of the 19th Amendment, while it appeared that all women achieved the right to vote, only a select representation of women really did achieve the right to vote. And that we saw over time, over the next several decades, until really the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that not all women had the right to vote. And we recognize that if you don't have the right to vote, if you don't have the right to contribute to your democracy, then you're unable to fight for equality and unable to guarantee not just yourself, but your family, what your family deserves. And so, again, even, in 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, again, not everybody actually achieved the right to vote. There was discrimination and certain laws that continue to sort of punish minority women and prevent them from actually casting their votes. So today we know that 65 million women in the United States of America are voting. We have 100 women representing us, at least in Congress, about 100 women. And so we've made progress, but we still have a long ways to go. Our rules, our society has largely been defined by men and a masculine value system, a power over, a dominance, an aggression, a win at all costs model of values. And so I'm a firm believer that we need to elevate more of the feminine, which I do believe men have the feminine leadership in them, but so that we can really elevate more of those universal traits, those human traits of empathy, care, and collaboration to move our society forward into the 21st century in a healthy, inclusive, equitable way. And so, again, recognizing our history and unveiling the true history of all those incredible suffragists that didn't necessarily look like me, that were women of color, that had fought on the front lines, but also behind the scenes, that enabled our country to achieve the passage of the 19th Amendment and continue to fight so many obstacles this story, this narrative is critical because it's not in our history books. We know that. And we're socializing, we're raising young girls and young boys, not with just seeing images of men in leadership, and women's stories not properly told. And we know that women are 51% of the population. So it's like, okay, people, we have work to do. So anyway, we partnered with national parks. We partnered with various entities across the country to really rewrite this history and share the true stories of the tireless women who made sacrifices before us and are the reason we are where we are today. And let's not forget, they were fighting for some of the things that we're still fighting for today: equal pay, fighting against violence against women, fighting for racial equity, fighting for representation and leadership. And so those are fights that we're still fighting for today. And so it's important to honor them. We stand on their shoulders. Our success is their success. I hope they're all looking down at us and cheering us on. Not to pivot, but, well, let me just share. So August was announced, we passed that August is Women's Suffrage Month. So it's an important month where, we need to educate all Americans about these incredible women who came before us. We have a wonderful special keynote that will be given by former Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton on August 17th. If you go to womensvote100.org, you'll see all the events that are planned for this month's celebration. COVID obviously having a huge impact on us not being able to be in person together. Buildings and monuments will be lit across the country. And in California, I'm really proud. We have 2 incredible exhibits at the California Museum that will really be anchored around women and women's power and inspiration. One of the exhibits is called Women Inspire, and I was really excited to contribute to really diversify and modernize a celebration of all the incredible women that have contributed to California history and been successful in California and really shed a light path for California. And that exhibit is opening shortly on the 18th. And then we have another suffrage exhibit that really will educate folks on the entire national suffrage movement, but really hone in on the women in California who contributed, again, who aren't in our history books, who contributed, who suffered, who made sacrifices, who overcame incredible obstacles to fight for women's right to vote. So, a lot's going on this month. I really encourage all of you to go to womensvote100.org to see what films are going to be available for streaming. I'm actually hosting a virtual event on August 26th that I hope you'll join me for. And there's lots coming. And again, we had to pivot with COVID, so we couldn't be in person, but we're doing the best we can. And it's critical, I think, that we share this history with all Californians and frankly, with everyone across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So now, and certainly appreciate the focus on the history and making sure that we're aware of the journey, because the journey continues. And now I'm going to bring it to the current journey that we're on in the workplace as women, and especially women of color. As a Chief People Officer with Bloom, we're certainly focused on creating the most inclusive environment possible for everybody, women, people of color, for all employees. I've been in top roles with both Cisco and Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And for women and women of color, that journey can be interesting and at times difficult. From your perspective, what do you think companies can do to contribute to either making the journey different or better for all women?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. Thank you. Well, first of all, we have to have inclusive workplaces and an inclusive workplace culture, and we have to address that right out. We have to bring in, trainings as relates to unconscious bias, and try and reverse that as individuals and also in the corporate culture. One of the things I encourage all of you to do is sign the Equal Pay CA Pledge, because unfortunately money talks in this society. We need money, you need wealth to get wealth. Women are underpaid, women of color are in particular underpaid, we know that. And when you look at the wealth gap is extreme between Caucasian women and Black women and Latina women. Just as obviously there's a huge gap between men and women broadly. So we have a lot of work to do to close the pay gap and the wealth gap for women of color. We have to address the culture. One of really the premise of our Equal Pay CA campaign, over 50 large corporations across California have signed on. They've taken the pledge, they've committed to an annual pay gap analysis, an annual analysis of their promotional and hiring practices to really reduce and get rid of, bias in hiring. And really, we're sharing educational tools that are looking at best practices. We're constantly innovating, thinking about who's doing the best work so that we can really innovate and close that pay gap. California actually has the strongest equal pay laws in the nation, and we want to close that gap to make it the smallest gap in the nation and really lead the nation in that regard. So I think, addressing pay is critical, addressing promotion and hiring practice is critical. You can't do that with a toxic bro culture, which a lot of men are even uncomfortable with. And so I think, standing in our strength and power and using our voice to speak up and out, allyship is critical. And I think it's frankly critical that this is not just a bottom-up movement, but a top-down movement. And it needs to be a priority in the private sector. In corporate America, just as it needs to be a priority in government. We're not going to make any progress unless we really embrace diversity, inclusion, and equity practices and have diverse entities, diverse people, and diverse conversations at the tables of power. One other initiative we're working on is the implementation of SB 826, Senator Hannah Beth Jackson's law, to ensure women have more representation on corporate boards, public corporate boards in the state of California. There's 660 public boards. The legislation mandated that these 660 companies have 1 woman on their board by the end of 2019 and 3 women at the beginning of 2021. And I'm really excited about the progress we're making. Again, not trying to reinvent the wheel, but basically with the work that we're doing through an organization that I founded, the California Partners Project with Olivia Morgan, we are committed to being a partner to those in this arena, in this space, and really partnering to uplift the good actors once we have all the metrics and measurements, really investing in the impact of women's representation and leadership on corporate boards, because we all know the more women you have in leadership, the greater the creativity, the productivity, and the better the bottom line. But also, streamlining the pipelines to board representation and then supporting the women once they're there. So, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. Obviously, COVID-19 has set us as a larger society back, and we can talk about that. But I am optimistic that we can make progress. We just have to make it a priority. It has to come from the top down and the bottom up. And women are here to stay, right? We embody I would say a relational transformative style of leadership that is required in the 21st century in a global economy. I always tease, my husband, I think he's an incredibly feminist leader, and I love him, and I'm gonna exclude him from the bro culture, but I love those images of these female leaders across the globe who are really fighting the pandemic in a really holistic, care-oriented way. Because it's really about leadership that leads with empathy and care and collaboration. And basically that's the leadership that we need moving forward. And women, not all women, but enough women have been socialized to lead with that value system, and a few good men. And so, that gives me hope. And again, for me, it's prioritizing women of color because of our history and the damage that has been done. The barriers that are still there, making it harder for women of color. And so we really want to focus on uplifting these women, and we know that there are good actors who are doing so, and we really want to celebrate them and set them up there as a role model for the rest of the the private sector and frankly government.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to you and to Governor Newsom for your fights for gender pay equity and for increasing representation of women on boards. And I'm proud to work for eBay where we have 4 women on our board. And speaking of women and girls, we have guests here today ranging in age from 10 to 86.
Amazing.
And so, yeah, it's just really incredible. And so, and huge thanks to Silicon Valley Leadership Group for sponsoring today's celebration of women. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts on how to encourage young women and girls who are starting out either in their schooling, education pursuits, in their careers, on how to help themselves and help society. Thank you.
No, it's a great question. I have 2 pieces of advice, or maybe 3, but the first is to trust your instincts and don't accept no as an answer. You belong out there on the soccer field playing with the boys if you so choose. You belong in that math and science class. In fact, you can be top of the class. You probably should be top of the class if you desire to. You know, you belong, you deserve to have a seat at those tables and in those games and activities, and that just because society has kind of shared this narrative with us that boys and men are natural born leaders just because we haven't seen enough women up there, doesn't mean that you don't deserve that and shouldn't be up there. I love, you know, there's that notion of if you can see it, you can be it. We talk a lot about that in the documentary Misrepresentation to inspire girls and women into leadership. But I love this one little excerpt from Misrepresentation where former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said, you know, that Sally Ride was her role model. And she said she didn't see somebody, she didn't see herself there, but Sally Ride was a role model to her. And so it's that concept of the more women that are in leadership, the more it's normalized for young boys and young girls. And again, just I want to like ingrain into young girls that they can do and be and achieve anything that they set out to achieve. The second thing is, because I think especially in our tween years, we start those questions and there's that self-doubt and that insecurity. And I went through it myself. Some things happened to me, some things I brought upon myself, but things happened to me where I lost a lot of confidence and a sense of safety and security. And I think it's really important to remind girls and women at all ages, but really especially in those tween years, that you're enough. You're good enough, you're smart enough, you're talented enough, you're enough. And I think that's really important. I mean, boys need to hear that as well. So I always carry that with me. It was something that helped me get through a really dark period in my life where someone said to me, Jennifer, you're enough. And so that's something. And then I guess another piece of advice is, you know, the journey's gonna be tough to equity. It's gonna be tough. And for women of color, it might be tougher. It's gonna be tougher. It has been tougher. But you can do it. You know, one thing that's been helping me lately, because I've been super overwhelmed with 4 young kids at home and homeschooling and, you know, childcare issues and my own jobs and work. And, you know, I realized if I just break things down into little baby steps and I take care of myself along the way, I take like mental breaks or self-care breaks. And I start celebrating the good things that I've accomplished or the accomplishments that day, even if it's, I mean, a personal thing, this is silly, but like I was so panicked because we have an au pair and it's the only way I survived COVID-19 homeschooling with 4 young kids because we had a live-in. And she was absolutely lovely and she's leaving in September and there are no visas allowing young girls to come in. And I was interviewing these young girls and I was despondent because I felt like nobody wanted to come work for the governor's family. It was too scary. And I was really taking it personally. And I just had to like take breaks from it and come back to it. And at the end of the day, or maybe no one wanted to work with someone that has 4 kids, but I came back to it, and we found someone. And the other day I realized that's a huge celebration. Like, that was a little step in all the things I have to do, but it was like an accomplishment to find an au pair that is excited to come be with our family and, willing to invest time with us over the next 6 months to a year. So I know that's a silly thing, but it was like, I have survived in my life through breaking things down into baby steps. Otherwise it's so overwhelming, and when things are so overwhelming, it's really hard to believe that you can overcome those obstacles or those challenges. So that would be some advice, because I think we're all really struggling right now, and women in particular are carrying so much on their shoulders, and this is sort of a pivot into COVID-19, but with not just probably already being mostly responsible for the home and childcare while also having careers and being breadwinners, but now they're in-home therapists and nurses and teachers, right, on top of everything else, and that is it's too much, right? And so for me, again, if I could teach young girls this, it's break things down into little baby steps and make sure you celebrate along the way, because you need that celebration to give yourself energy and to refuel. You need the rest and the celebration to give yourself energy and to refuel, so that you can ultimately, keep moving forward, because the march to equity it's a long one. This is not a sprint. I'm a sprinter, but this is a marathon. And so it's like, this is how I've learned to be a marathon runner. Baby steps.
That's great. And I'm going to piggyback on Maria's question. As a parent of 2 now young adult daughters, and I'm like, okay, they've launched or launching, and with 4 kids, and in the midst of a pandemic, and essential workers are having to get out there every day, and with all the challenges that we have in the world that we're living in addition to the normal day-to-day challenges. If you could please just give us a few words of encouragement to the population that is just immersed in the challenge that we're facing today with both COVID-19 and trying to balance it all out.
Yeah. No, it's a really great and timely and important question. Look, it's these are messy times. These are dark times. It's a chapter. It will be a chapter in our lives. We are going to get through this. California is going to get through this. We're actually, unfortunately, when you look at the models, we're like peaking right now. We're going to get through this, because people are going to wake up and get smart and start wearing masks and start being more responsible. Or we moms are going to hammer home, to everyone that they need to be more responsible. But we are going to get through this. Look, I see mental health everywhere, mental health issues everywhere. I see it in my own kids. They have so much anxiety. They're so scared. We have, we were exposed, me and the kids, we had to quarantine away from my husband. It was scary. And we got through it. It created more anxiety though. They were afraid they were going to die. It was like a really scary period. And, it is not something that I just think we all need to lead with love and empathy and energy, and we are all in this together. No one's separate, no one's invisible, no one's, apart from this. One of the campaigns that we launched out of the First Partners Office, and I'm really proud of, is a Me to We campaign. We launched it with the California Volunteers Agency and also with Nextdoor. And it's really about celebrating and uplifting all the beautiful stories of people giving of themselves to others, making it about others and not just themselves. And so I actually think the silver lining in all of this, and it's, let me, I have friends who have lost friends. I haven't lost anyone directly. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering. And I in no way want to not acknowledge that. But there is, if you take that in and you mourn that, there is still a silver lining. I mean, I think of when my sister died, there's still a silver lining, as painful as it was, as much as it still makes me want to cry. There's a silver lining, there's a gift. And I think what we as a society are being given is this gift that we have not paid enough attention to our health and our well-being as a society.
that we've made everything be about power and money and not about people. And so I think we're all being given a gift that we're in this together. There's no leak on your side of our boat. You're only, you know that saying, you're only as happy as your least happy child. You're only as happy as your least happy neighbor. You know, we have protesters outside of our house on the far right and the far left protesting everything, right? And they're not happy. And my husband's so patient with it. I'm not, but he's extremely patient with it. I mean, it does eat at you, but because people are struggling, the struggle is real. There's also misinformation, and that's a problem in our society. There's a tremendous misinformation campaigns going on that is very dangerous, and we know that. It's why we all need to vote in the next election, and hold media and technology responsible and accountable for telling the truth. But there is an opportunity to recognize our common humanity, our shared humanity in all this. And so I hold on to that, and that's what keeps me going, and that's what gives me hope. And I think when all is said and done, I think we're gonna come out healthier, as healthier entities, whether the family will ultimately be healthier, the family unit, whether the corporation will be healthier because it'll realize it has to address things that it's been ignoring, like care and empathy, family leave, flex time, remote work, childcare, you know, recognizing that not all of us are robots. We don't all necessarily come into the workplace with just one life, the work life. We actually have lives outside of work. And I think, so again, I think there's a gift that is brewing, that's simmering, that's there if we want to take advantage of it and learn from it. And that's what gives me hope, because I think enough of us are conscious and are going to make change individually and at the community and institutional levels. And I think we can soar, but just to kind of close on that, we have to anchor women and families at the center of our recovery, whether it's our corporations' recovery, our families' recovery, or frankly, public policy. We have to anchor women and families. And so that's obviously some of the work I'm trying to champion and we're trying to do out of the First Partners Office.
Thank you for your encouraging words.
Thank you for sharing your stories and for reminding us all about the importance of mental health and well-being and all of our shared humanity in these times of crisis. And so just as a reminder, all of us are incredibly fortunate and we've worked hard, we've been successful in our careers. We're so lucky to live in the United States and in the state of California and to contribute to our economy. And at the same time, we all come from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different races and ethnicities. And would love to hear your thoughts about what insights you might have on racial justice and equity issues facing our state and our nation today. And what would you like to see California as a state do with all these huge issues?
No, thank you. It's a really important question. You can't have gender equity without racial equity. They're one and the same. You need them both. And again, I think all of our recovery efforts, and I know this is the governor's priority, have to center around women and racial minorities and really equity as a whole. We just made a documentary that's coming out in October called The Great American Lie. It looks at social immobility and inequality in America and how the gaps between the have and have-nots have gotten so great, such that we're nearing, we're not surpassing how the situation prior to the Great Depression. I think COVID's made it worse, obviously. We know that women of color have been at the front lines. They're most of our essential workers, just as they're many of the workers, the majority of the workers that have been laid off, just as they have that dual burden of care and caregiving and work, being breadwinners and caregivers. And so we have to put women of color in particular, I think, at the center of our recovery efforts and look at the pay gaps that exist in this state and country. And again, as I said earlier, I think, I think, what is the statistic? In California women lose $78.6 billion annually to the pay gap. We have to close that gap. And we also have to obviously do it for men of color, but we have to close that gap. And that's one significant way to start. And then, as I said earlier, we need diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in corporate America, in all entities and organizations, because we are a melting pot. We are a diverse country. We are not white. We are, the narrative has to shift. The narrative needs to reflect who we really are, and all of our stories. I think about my work in the entertainment industry, and I do think we're making progress there, but we have a long ways to go. So, this is a cultural revolution and it's a policy revolution, and both have to happen at the same time. Again, I'm really proud of the governor's work in this arena. He's made it, the forefront of his policy agenda. And obviously, we're simultaneously trying to do the same out of the First Partner's Office. But it's really seeing the humanity in each other, sharing stories, and committing to uplift each other, especially when one comes from a place of privilege. So it's about allyship, and it's prioritizing equity across this great state. And again, I'm a firm believer, as is my husband, that as California goes, so can go the country. And we've come far. If you look at our history in California, we were not the kindest, most empathetic state initially. And that's a whole other story for a whole other conversation. My husband at one point was writing a book about this. California has a dark history, a history of violence and discrimination. And it's made tremendous progress. It still has a ways to go. But I think it can be a model for the rest of the country, and I'm proud to be a part of efforts to close the racial equity gaps and really ensure that every child that is born in California has their needs met such that they can fulfill their human potential.
That's wonderful. So, Jennifer, we only have about 3 more minutes, and got to get this last question in. As Marie mentioned, we have multi-generations watching today, which is great. And you are a role model for women around the globe. We'd like to know, who's your role model and why?
So I am inspired by so many women, but I have to say, my mom and my grandmother, my mom and her mother, have been role models to me. And I think I fought that for a while. I think sometimes we either, as children, grow up and sort of become our parents, or rebel and try and become something else. And I probably initially was rebelling. My mother took on, she was really creative and was working when she met my father, and slowly her independence and creative actually took a back seat to my father wanted her to help raise their 5 daughters. And so I think I rebelled against that in some way, because I didn't want to, I wanted my own career, my own income, my ability to have power, economic power in a relationship. And I learned from that. And the thing that one of the reasons she's a role model to me is because my mom was so selfless and has always put us first. And I think that in some ways I aspire towards that, but I also think self-care is critical. And so I guess she was my role model because I learned from her. I learned what to do and what not to do, but mostly she inspired me because she was so giving and she believed in me no matter what. Through all my ups and downs in life, she was my biggest supporter and advocate. And she told me from the earliest of ages, you are a leader. You can do anything, you can be anything, I'm here for you. And it moves me because you need that at home, and not all of us have that. And so I'm very privileged and lucky to have had that. Now, there were dark days, right? I mean, I did go to Stanford Business School, and my parents, I think, thought I was going to come home with a husband and be taken care of. And that was not my agenda or interest. But we fought a lot because I had a path, and I was going to do this, and they wanted me to be a little bit more traditional and conservative. But they've inspired me. And my grandmother, Grandma Jean, she raised 4 kids pretty much on her own. My grandfather, Grandpa Jack, was in the military. He was actually a mayor at one point in a little town in Montana. But he was in the Air Force. She pretty much moved her boys and girls across the country on a train, and then they took a boat, a train, and then bus, and then boat, and moved to England. They'd been in Virginia and Minnesota and Montana. They lived all over, and she pretty much raised them on her own while working in the military, and then also continuing public service through working in the equivalent of the Salvation Army while when she was older and after my grandfather had passed away. But she was just, once again, another selfless, tireless, community-oriented individual, and just a really balanced, beautiful human being. So those are my role models. I'm sorry I went.
No, that's great.
But I mean, you can learn so much, right, from everyone around you. And there, again, there are ups and downs and positives, darkness and light in every relationship. But I think, that I'm just so grateful that these 2 women have inspired me to pursue my passions and be of service. And I wish for everyone to have inspiration in their world. And it's not always in the house, right? It's sometimes you have to find it outside.
Jennifer, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful and definitely inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I believe we are actually formally out of town. We were, wanted to have some Q&A session, but we don't. So what we're going to do now, I believe so thank you so much. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and I personally learned a lot, and sure the audience have learned a tremendous, and we're left awe-inspired. So
thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Wonderful.
But thanks to you. It's a wonderful event. I'm so glad you're doing this, and love to everyone, and be safe. We'll get through this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So with that, I believe we're going to turn it over to Carl, right?
Yes, thank you, First Partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom, to Marie O. Huber of eBay, to Sonia Wilkerson of Bloom Energy. What an amazing group of leaders and an inspiring conversation. One of my friends and mentors talks about leaving every conversation, making the other person or people feel an inch taller. And I feel several inches taller after hearing those incredible remarks today. I have the pleasure of asking the Vice President of ORA, Lynette Carrasco, to provide us with 1 or 2 of her takeaways from today's session before we close. Lynette Carrasco?
Thank you so much, Carl. Truly inspiring to have been in Jennifer Newsom's presence. We heard from so many wonderful women today, and I'm sure many of us can agree that everyone we heard from was very inspiring, and it was truly an honor to have been in all of their presence. The strength, transparency, and progressiveness that we heard today is just what we need to truly drive systemic changes. I really thank you all of the women who participated today, for helping shape the future for the female leaders of tomorrow, by continuing to advocate for inclusivity and using the platforms that they have to drive change. Thank you all for your tenacity and stance on equality through intentional decision-making, proactive changes at the highest caliber, and lifting women up. As a female leader in Silicon Valley, I appreciate all of the support in pushing for females, minorities, and people of color. And as a mother, I am truly grateful to all of you. The work that you do will impact generations to come, more specifically the generation of women who will come after us. Because of all of you, they will have the collective strength, intelligence, and fearlessness needed to rise and reach their fullest potential. And for that, I truly thank all of you. Thank you, Carl.
Lynette Carrasco, what eloquent remarks. We want to thank you and ORA for what you do to serve the unbanked, who are often people of color throughout our state and nation. What a noble mission of a great company in ORA, and your leadership for that company as Vice President. I also want to thank and recognize leaders on our team at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group who made today possible, led by Shannon Diatley Johnson, our fearless, creative, and courageous Special Events and Signature Events Senior Director, joined by Pam Kelly and Kelly Kirkendall, on our communications team, and Megan White, my executive assistant, and so many people on our team. You noticed all 4 of those who put today together are women, and they're incredible leaders in our organization and in our community. Let's make sure that we don't solely take this inspirational morning together and file it away. Let's share it. Soon, please go to the Silicon Valley Leadership Group website, download different parts that we've recorded, share it with your friends, your companies, your community, so that we can continue to make progress as a community and as a country in these efforts that we all know that we need to raise up powerful women and girls, people of color, and all of us for a more just society. It's why the leadership group is honored to be upgrading our focus on racial justice and equity, which we know as a nation and as a corporate community, we have great strides that we still need to make. By joining arms and linking hands with leaders in our faith-based communities, our racial justice and economic justice communities who have been toiling with these efforts for years and often decades. Together, we truly can, as you heard earlier, speak up, step up, and stand up for a greater nation. On behalf of all of my colleagues and the 350 member companies who comprise the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, we thank you for working together for a more just society. With that, we wish you well and thank you for your time with us today.